Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on what's happening on the ground and to learn about new trends emerging within the construction industry. The show is brought to you in partnership with Place Engage, a data-driven platform for more successful public consultation and community engagement for your next development project. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tony Grant, Director with GIA Surveyors in Dublin. Tony, you're very welcome. It's great to see you again.
Good morning, Carol. Thanks very much indeed for having me.
And Tony, since we last met in person, we've had to assign a new title to you. So as I mentioned there, you are now a director with GIA Surveyors in Dublin. Congratulations on your move.
Thanks ever so much. Yes, I'm thrilled to be given the opportunity to take up the reign here at GIA. I think it's just great timing.
Well, tell us a little bit about GIA Surveyors.
GIA Surveyors was established 30 years ago. We were traditionally a surveying and design consultancy. So really London, Manchester and Bristol. We opened in 2018 in Belfast and 2021 in Dublin. I was brought in, early this year, let's say January this year. I officially took up the reins of the Dublin office to support the Pan Island network and the business overall. It's going really well. I can't believe how quickly it's gone already.
Well, talk to us a little bit about the types of services you're doing, because we're seeing within construction and across the built environment, the role of surveyor has become increasingly more specialised. So talk to us maybe about some of the actual work that you're doing or the projects that you and the team are involved in.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that the track record and the people, the mix of the surveyors within GIA, I'm astonished at the background and perhaps the former lives that many of the surveyors have had or done before they joined GIA. Traditionally, GIA was daylighting, sunlighting and rights of light analysis and consultancy. That's very much sort of a UK focused, really led by legislation in those regions, but it is becoming more of an issue and more of an opportunity and more of a consultancy important part of the planning process here in the island of Ireland. So we are now doing that core business as well as the measured surveys, the area referencing, and the perhaps more traditional building consultancy or building surveying services, which is I'm a chartered registered building surveyor by background, so that skill is very close to my heart. 25 years ago when I landed in Ireland, people didn't really know what building surveyors were. So that's now changed dramatically since that 25 years period. But it's really, as the increased heights and density of developments are being explored in the Irish market, particularly Dublin and Cork, that daylight, sunlight and rights to light consultancy is really, really fundamental to those schemes being successfully granted planning now, and helping the development team understand how the orientation of the site might work or could work better. And certainly for the building surveying side, vendor surveys, purchaser surveys, dilapidations, all that traditional building surveying, building consultancy work. There's a huge amount of demand for that, even though the market is seemingly quiet or quieter than it has been for a long time. All the reports on last year were very much doom and gloom, and it was the quietest year since ever. But we were still busy. We are still busy, and I certainly see we're going to be busier in assets that are being prepared for sale. So that's the owners wanting to understand what's right or what's wrong with their asset before bringing it to market, as much as the agents and knowing how big the actual asset really is. So that's the net, the gross, the IPMS size of the asset, which can be accurately reported. So all that, I suppose the mix of all that is really important. And the life cycle of the property market, whether there's an acquisition or a development or a lease being discussed, or the management of the assets during the life or ultimate disposal and potential redevelopment. We fit into all that life cycle, which I think is just terrific.
It's a really interesting space at the moment, though, in light of regulations coming down the track in terms of building energy performance. We know that, retrofit is going to be a huge part of any portfolio owner's agenda over the coming decade. But there are some kind of nuances there as well, where we're seeing maybe some trends taking building from one use to another. So whether it's office or retail into residential, have you come across any projects, I suppose, along that?
Yes, we have. I mean, there's lots of discussion and thought on change of use for vacant older office stock and how it can be converted into potential residential use. So yes, that's being explored, I suppose, with some of our clients. As much as the headlines this week was Irish Life are looking to invest a significant amount of money in their, I suppose, their older stock. That's proactive asset management. I mean, many of our clients are looking at their building stock now, and their, I suppose, reactive housekeeping as much as proactive housekeeping on their stock and on their assets. And that's with a view of the future of how the building can be repositioned in a potential change of use or a blended change of use, as much as discussions with tenants and retaining those tenants to remain in situ, exploring, and something which we're doing a lot of now is the solar panel work. So so many industrial buildings, there's a huge amount of roof space there which would all potentially benefit from an easy fix of a solar panel going on that roof to ultimately benefit energy performance. And that could be a win-win if landlords and tenants negotiate that process, as much as the earlier stage of the green lease discussions before the new lease is agreed. So it's, as you say, it's a very good mix of you feel like an alchemist with all the ingredients going on in that perfect mix.
It is an interesting time, and I suppose I'm very aware that you've been in and doing this work for more than 2 decades at this stage. How have things changed in terms of, you talk about, say, some of the core services there, daylight, sunlight analysis, right to light. I mean, all of this is feeding into planning, but obviously we've seen planning transform, and not in a positive way, over the past 2 decades. And while the new Planning and Development Act, it's hoped, will address some of the concerns, the reality is that planning has not just been a problem, it's really been the problem for the built environment over the last number of years. And that's created some interesting changes, like changes in the services that planners, private planning consultancies offer. Has that changed how you approach your services?
I don't think it's changed. I think we've had to just change, refine. I suppose you're trying to speed up the process. There's always going to be a bottleneck with planning, whether it's a straightforward planning application and consent, or if it goes to appeal or whatever. You're trying to foresee those obstacles, but sometimes that's hard. You can't anticipate everyone's move when it comes to a planning application. Or potential objections. And I'm astonished at how much development is stuck in a bottleneck at the moment within the Irish market. I'm not close enough to the other markets in the UK or whatever, but it's a different process, it's a different system there. I still shudder sometimes when I try to explain to our international clients, when they're looking at developments and the whole self-certification of the planning and the building regulations compliance. I still think that's, despite the change in 2014, I still think that's a slight misnomer as to how it should be managed properly. But it's there, it's a process. We are where we are. It's an interesting situation.
I suppose it's one of these things that, in over the past decade, steps were taken in terms of regulations, and then the question has to be asked, have we overcorrected in terms of building standards? Have we overcorrected in some of the more ad hoc legislation that has been introduced? But when we look at the Planning and Development Bill, certainly we were promised a radical overhaul. I don't think anybody in the industry sees what's coming down the track as a radical overhaul at all, like a bit of tweaking that will hopefully improve things. But I mean, there have been opportunities lost over the past decade and a half, particularly since the crash, where we could have made much better decisions that would have streamlined the delivery of projects, whether it's residential or commercial or important healthcare or education. And those opportunities are being consistently missed. And now we're entering into really an interesting political time. So when you're speaking to your clients, what is their sentiment on the marketplace?
I think they see it as a good opportunity if they've got the right potential, the right plan. You can look at the Celtic Tiger stage when developments there. A planner said yes, and a bank said yes. The developer got stuck in, and then the world stopped, and there was left with legacy half-built schemes or other disasters from those Celtic Tiger developments. The process now. Certainly, I think the running the ruler over the balance sheet and the spreadsheet, just trying to make sense of the costs and the time it takes. The amount of cranes that are still on the skyline, swinging activity, showing construction is ongoing in various pockets around the city centre. That there's Castle Forbes Road and the schemes that are coming north and south of the Liffey. That's terrific to see, but those schemes are going to be coming out of the ground and reaching completion probably just at the right time, because that's when demand will still be high and they're ahead of the curve. Anyone looking to start a scheme now has to really run the risk. You've got to be cash rich, or the investment needs to be, I suppose, take a view on the risk of the process taking as long as it might well take.
That's not just putting pressure on the output and elements that we need across the built environment. At an individual business level, we know it's putting huge pressure on businesses. So I suppose I'm interested with GIA Surveyors being a relatively new entry into the Dublin market. You have history of essentially doing this, coming in at an early stage and launching a UK brand into the Dublin market and making that work and growing the team and all of those. There's challenges across all parts of that, not just about growing the pipeline, refining the services suitable to the marketplace in the moment, but also actually attracting the talent that's going to grow the team in the direction that you want. Can you share with us maybe some of the vision you have for GIA Surveyors in Dublin?
I certainly, when I suppose pondered the move with my wife and family at home tail end of last year. It was like, look at the sky and here we go again. And I said, yes, but this will be the third time. So let's roll the sleeves up and get stuck in. And I've done it before, so I'll do it again. I think the last time for me was, I suppose, at the end of the financial crash, 2013, 2014. Timing was just right, where developments and transactions were starting to happen again. Those green shoots really did develop into the boom that we then had, although that was short-lived with the Brexit scenario and then of course COVID too. But I think now 2023 was the low point. 2024 and beyond will see things pick up properly. I think certainly to be more innovative in how we do things. We're not just traditional building surveyors doing a traditional building survey, which could be a lengthy report. We're being innovative now, using drones and other sort of specialist equipment, which gets the job done quicker. And sometimes we're using a system now which it's the Matterport system. So you're walking through the building and you're able to literally share that with the client straight away, and they don't actually need to read the report. They can actually see the important bits of the report, but you're walking them through the building, showing them the leaky roof, the broken windows, or whatever the issues might be. That's far more visual and easier to share than here's a 150-page report which someone has to trawl through and look for the important bits. Finding ways to keep ahead of the curve, and like I say, be innovative. I suppose our strapline is unlocking potential for a better built environment, and that's what we collectively are trying to do with all the services that we are doing and providing. But tweaking those and trying to make it more engaging. It's terrific to see some of the outputs and some of the enthusiasm that some of the younger surveyors can bring with them. And why have we always done it like that? Let's do something like this. And to get a forum going, to get a discussion going, and sharing ideas, and that's outputs of reports and getting feedback from clients as well as to you're trying something new. Look, you're being a guinea pig perhaps, but we haven't done this before. But how do you rate it? How can we refine it to make it easier for you? And that's some of our investment broker agent clients as much as the end investment individual themselves.
And how much has the technology, it's interesting we mentioned the use of, say, drone technology, or whether you're using kind of the walkthroughs with Matterport, how has technology changed how you not just how you deliver the services, but maybe how that will shape the team that you're going to build around you compared to maybe the team that you would have needed 10 years ago?
Well, I'll hold my hands up. I'm a complete dinosaur when it comes to I can just about manage Word and Excel, but anything other than that is a challenge. So that's something which I've always promised myself I must try and work on. But I think for the younger guys and girls coming out, they're probably far used to seeing how these tools can work. I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen GIA do for the View City, which is our sort of sister company, so some of that modeling, the 3D modeling, and how very quickly a potential development scheme and site can be worked up, showing the massing and the density and its ultimate impact on the adjacent sites. That's just fantastic, and that data is just there to be shared and worked on. And I just think and the wind analysis as well, that's something else, which is something that was all new to me in January this year, but I'm learning quick, and it's terrific to see how these guys have come from a Formula One background, but they've helped us develop this wind analysis, which is just I find it mind-blowing, but it's the way of the future.
In what types of projects would that be used? I'm not familiar with that. I haven't come across that at all.
It's really how the schemes and how a neighborhood of an overall scheme could be affected. The Chicago is known as the Windy City. So what impact a particular scheme or development might have on the adjacent sites. So it's in conjunction with the light and daylight and light obstruction notices and all that good stuff. But this is another layer of how the scheme can be tweaked, and it's surprising how many developers and architects are asking for that advice, which is great.
In terms of again, the challenge you have now in terms of growing the team, I mean, look, it's one of those maybe exciting challenges that you have the opportunity to build a team around you over the next year or two. So in terms of how the services are evolving, first of all, what are the roles that you're recruiting for at the moment? But I suppose in the grand scheme of things, what's the multidisciplinary team that you see GIA in Dublin having?
Yeah, the traditional building surveying has changed from traditional building surveying to you're doing a building survey of an industrial shed one day, a retail shopping centre the next day, a Georgian converted townhouse the day after that. So no 2 days or no 2 assets are the same. And you're doing acquisition surveys, vendor surveys, dilapidations for landlords or tenants. That's the all-rounder that you need to have in the current commercial market of the building surveyor. I think to look at the commercial picture as well, and it's not all doom and gloom. It's finding a solution. So what needs to be, where's the risk in an acquisition going ahead on a particular transaction? What's the capex or opex exposure? So being able to advise the client on that aspect as well. But then the other side is the building, the building area surveys, so the geomatic surveying and area referencing, the boundary mapping. I mean, the boundary mapping issue is still such an issue. You see so many headlines of developments and boundaries and neighbourly disputes. The folio mapping, making sure that parcel of land actually is under the ownership of who you think it is, and there's no gap in the middle of a fairly complex site where there could be literally a gap in the middle, and no one seems to know who owns that ultimately important gap, or could be a ransom strip and stuff like that. So it's the blend of the building surveyor, the geomatic surveyor. I think certainly ESG and consultancy on repositioning of the assets, refurbishment, repositioning of those assets, tying in with the daylight and sunlight, and I suppose the party wall and neighbourly matters work as well, which is something which we are doing here, even though it's not the same legislation or nowhere near as strict as London, for instance. But it's still an important part of the development jigsaw and that process. So it's really guiding the schemes through from cradle to grave, and hopefully getting out the other end when everyone's pleased with the finished result.
I'm always surprised when the issue of boundary mapping comes up on the show here, because maybe this is something that I might have assumed we had in order, going back to the land registry. And so actually, back in the 1960s, but yet it appears that either this wasn't done in a way that was very accurate, or why, in terms of boundary mapping, how are we in such a poor situation now, when we actually have been officially mapping for decades?
Well, I think that again, it's the technology, and it's how the traditional mapping was perhaps a scale rule and a rod and a tape measure, and taking for granted what it actually looks like on the ground. Whereas that wall could have ultimately been built in the wrong place previously. So it's now a case of mopping up and just double checking and verification of those maps. And even a lease map, it's very easy, human error, red line drawn in the wrong side of the wall, or picking up a part of the overall building which doesn't form part of the tenant's demise. It's a bit of a no-brainer. But 2014, when we were working with many of the NAMA assets that were being brought for sale, we didn't know how big they were. We didn't quite know where they were or what condition they were in. And there was certainly a lack of certification and documentation going with those Celtic Tiger schemes. So the first piece of that puzzle then was, let's verify the areas and let's check that these as-built drawings are actually as-built. So when you translate an as-built drawing to something which you think is actually an accurate folio map, and it's getting to site and using now the tools of the trade, where you're literally GPS tracking that your north, south, east, west is matching what it should be.
And do you think, in terms of, is this an issue that we're just going to be dealing with as each parcel, as each property comes up? As in, can we take it that everything that was done in the past is going to, as technology improves, with each transaction, with each activity or event on the property or the site, is going to need essentially to be remapped?
Well, I think I suppose it ties in with the compulsory registration of titles. So once that process, it is well underway, and as sites are more complex and might involve more owners, it's going to as more development sites, whether it's a greenfield site or a brownfield site, you just double checking that the areas are where they should be.
Very good. It's finally, Tony, you mentioned just ESG and maybe helping your clients get their house in order. ESG is something that we talk about almost every week on the show, and there's been a real shift from us seeing maybe funding requirements driving ESG adoption, or particularly more sustainability, more so than maybe the social and governance aspects. But now we're moving into an area where it's high on the compliance agenda. What are the driving forces that you're seeing across your clients? Is it essentially complying with standards now, or are they genuinely looking to future-proof their portfolios?
I think it's a good blend. It's a mix. There's definitely a move to sort of tick a box, but it's also now in ticking that box. What does that box ticking actually mean, and how can the clients, whatever the client is, how they can ultimately achieve their own ESG agenda once they've navigated that for themselves, because it's still very much an evolutionary process, and it's in a state of change and significant growth and opportunity as well.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. And I suppose it's a reason why we're always interested in not just the motivations, but maybe what are the expected outcomes. So I think the ESG space is an interesting one right now, and I'm particularly interested in social value, because I feel like that there's some really untapped opportunities there. I think that's the potential for differentiation in the market as well. A lot of what we're doing on the sustainability side has now fallen into the bucket of compliance, whereas actually I think what we do on the social side is what gets our teams excited. It's what really adds value to the community. So I see huge potential here. And to me, it doesn't feel very modern at all. It feels like what the home builders of a century ago were doing and trying to do. And so it's something that I welcome and I'm quite excited about. Speaking to your clients and portfolio owners that you're dealing with there, the organizations you're dealing with, what are their expectations over the next kind of year to 24 months? Because we are coming into an interesting time politically, environmentally. There are so many different agendas clashing, and it's one of these things when everything is a concern, nothing's a concern. When everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. What are you hearing from your clients? What are their expectations over the next kind of 12 to 24 months?
I think that I think some are saying it's a case of wait and see, and so others are being more proactive, and let's see what legislation or other drivers there might be. That's the landlord's perspective, tenant's perspective, developer's perspective. There's a different angle from those three directions alone. So I think it will be a case of navigating. If buildings aren't letting because they're ultimately out of date, what needs to be done, and where's that money going to come from, and is that going to be a joint venture with landlord and tenants? I think what iProperty have done down on North Quay there, and that's fantastic to redevelop that particular scheme in such a way, but to have the opportunity to put a tenant into another building while that redevelopment is being done, that's fantastic. But not everyone's in that position to maximize that opportunity. So it'll be a case of the new shiny stock as that's finished and let and occupied, and that's another conundrum too. I mean, how much space do people actually need? We had the conundrum ourselves in my former life and in my current new position here, where we were going to base ourselves, how much space we needed, what sort of building did we need to be in or want to be in. Ultimately, it's what suited us for location wise to where our market was. And ultimately, yes, it was a space that worked in that respect. But it's not a shiny new box by the Liffey by any means. But I mean, sometimes people don't need all those.
No, that's very fair. And I do think it's interesting time, so it's something we'll be watching with interest. And I suppose finally, a little closer to home, what can we expect to see from GIA Surveyors in Dublin over the next year?
I think you'll see more of an awareness of the brand. I think certainly people didn't really realise that we were here in Dublin since 2021. But that's my goal and ambition, is to grow the profile, to grow the brand, and grow the client base, and grow the team, and just enjoy it whilst we're doing it. I think the urban design and the way things are being developed now, there's such a good mix, and I just think for Dublin to be continued as a attractive place to live and work and play, It's a mix of everything we've talked about today and other things as to how that can be continued, despite the pressures from stuff that's totally out of our control.
Tony, if anyone can do it, you can do it, and I look forward to watching the process. And I think you've got a great attitude there in your approach, that you get stuck into it and enjoy it while you're doing it. So the very best of luck to you and the team. That was Tony Grant, Director with GIA Surveyors in Dublin. My thanks to show producer Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media. Also thanks to Place Engage for making these conversations possible. And finally, thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of Breaking Ground. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows here on iPropertyRadio.com.